Welcome back to KSG. Welcome if it's your first time here. And today we are going to discuss some two-way radios here. So how does this actually fit into everything? Number one, if you look back at our channel, you'll notice that we did a PACE video a while back when we discussed your primary or alternate contingency and emergency communication plans. Because in the event of any kind of emergency, whether that's twisting your ankle or bad weather coming in, information is king. And you have to have multiple ways to get it over to you. So what a lot of people like to do is they like to go and look at two-way radios for this. Two-way radios are a beautiful way into a contingency or emergency type communication plan because number one, they're inexpensive to get into, or at least they can be. They're relatively simple to use, and they give you a fairly good range, but you do have to know what you're getting into. So for most of us going to look at that, what we're going to do is look for kind of like a grown-up professional level walkie-talkie. And if you go into your local big box or outfitter store, you're going to see tons of these things. And they're going to be from good companies like Midland and things like that, and they're going to advertise up to a 10-mile range. All right, so what you're getting there is a radio called FRS, or Family Radio Services. This is a radio that's going to operate from somewhere just under a watt to right around 2 watts of output. And right now with no frame of reference, that kind of means so what? And what it really means is that when they say 10 miles of range, they mean 10 miles, like if you're maybe on a lake or something like that, or some really nice flat land, or maybe you're up high, and you've got a line of sight almost all the way to the horizon, and you've got good clear weather, fresh batteries, and somebody else in that same situation that you can get to. And even then, I seriously doubt you're going to have anything meaningful, for more than maybe 2 miles max. I really just don't see it working better than that, and most of us simply don't live in those kind of conditions. The other part about those radios is they may have as few as 13 pre-programmed channels that you're going to know as channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, etc. You can have as many as 22 on there, but that's getting into a more premium radio that's probably going to be costing around $45 or $50 for each unit-ish, somewhere in there. And the cream of the crop may have what is known as NOAA Weather Radio, which is the Federal Weather Service. And it's a great asset for knowing if we have inclement weather coming our way and what we might be looking at. So all of this is good stuff, but you could be in there for somewhere around $60 to $100 a set. You're still going to have very limited range and really kind of a smaller feature set, and there's not a lot of customization that you can do in them. The advantage that you're getting for is it's going to be great from car to car if you're going down the interstate. It could work for camping or organizing like a small group, like say a hayride or something like that through, as it is October now and hayrides are a thing. So maybe you're working with your group to provide the kids a good hayride or something like that. Or you're just staying in touch with your hiking group or maybe even kayaking. This will work decent for that kind of stuff. But that's kind of where it ends. A very limited range. And once you get out past about that 2 miles, no matter what, that's kind of it. So if you've got somebody 4 miles away, you're going to have you over here talking to this guy at 2 miles, and then that guy's going to repeat to this guy 2 more miles out, and that's how you're going to get to 4 miles, sort of making an ad hoc mesh. This is good. It's a lot better than smoke signals or carrier pigeon, but it's 2023, we can do better. And that is where we're going to step up to GMRS, or General Mobile Radio Services. GMRS is going to share the same base 22 channels as FRS, but we're going to do so at least on channels 1 through 7 at 5 watts instead of, say, 2 watts with FRS, which one would think would double our distance, but in reality it doesn't. It's still subject to those same rules about that line of sight. These are line of sight radios. But GMRS does a couple of things that FRS can't. In terms of that, one of them is that higher power, which means that at that 2 miles, it's going to be easier to understand what's being transmitted, or we're going to be able to push things out a lot further. And we can take these antennas that are good that they come with, and we can remove them and add an antenna that is better. Now, in the two-way radio world, better for an antenna is generally, for these hand talker units, going to be synonymous with slightly larger. There are some exceptions out there that are even shorter, that in a certain frequency range are exceptional, but the ones most used are going to be a little bit longer. And that's going to bring me to another principle for these radios, and that is a principle of height makes might. So if you're trying to reach out further with any kind of two-way radio communication, seek the high ground, get above the structures and above the trees and things like that, and you're going to be able to go out further. So those two concepts covered, I said that GMRS had a couple of advantages. More power, and we can go to a bigger antenna. Given that we can change these antennas, there's a third type of antenna we can go to, the kind that would either attach to the roof of your vehicle or to like a TV antenna outside your house or anything like that, known as aerial antennas. This is worth a show all unto itself, but suffice it to say there's a lot that can be done with these antennas to increase the power of these little hand talkers. Not the power putting out, but the power we have to communicate with them. Remember, these are going to generally be limited to 5 watts. You can get some that are rated up to 8, maybe even more, but in general, 5 watts is what we're going to see in a hand talker. Hand talker is radio jargon for what we think of as a walkie-talkie. Another advantage that GMRS has that you won't find in FRS is they have mobile and base stations versions of these as well that are designed to either be installed in your vehicle or in a specific place in your home with a power supply that can go, get ready for this, up to 50 watts of power, which is going to greatly extend the range that you can transmit. And we're going to see why that might even matter a bit more in a moment there. But more power is like higher ground. It's going to be more better, for lack of a better way of putting it. You're going to be able to reach out and touch someone with a whole lot less issue than with a smaller hand talker. In general now, we're going to go back to the world of hand talkers for this next part. FRS is going to use 2 watts on channels 1 through 7 and 15 through 22. Channels 8 through 14, it's going to use less to conserve more power. GMRS will follow roughly the same thing, but with about 5 watts on 1 through 7 and legal up to 50 watts a channel on 15 through 22. And we're going to be dialed down in power on 8 through 14. GMRS and FRS do overlap and can talk to each other. Now I want you to keep in mind that we've talked about more power from GMRS. So if we talk about 0 to, let's say that this antenna represents the wave between 0 and 2 volts, then this one is going to be 0 and 5. This is going to live somewhere right in the middle. So when you are talking on this more powerful radio, imagine that this antenna is simulating how big your signal is. And when it comes in, the top and bottom are going to get clipped off when you're listening on an FRS radio, which is going to, what's going to come out to you is going to be somewhat choppy audio. So you may not have the easiest time understanding what's being said, although you can talk on it. Conversely, when you transmit off of your FRS and you hit that GMRS antenna, your signal is smaller. And in the radio, a smaller signal means a quieter signal. So you're not going to be able to understand as easy, though you can talk. Your best experience will be FRS to FRS or GMRS to GMRS. So in my book, one huge advantage of GMRS, I can, with a little bit of effort, at least talk with FRS. Now, one more thing to note, GMRS radios will all have this port in addition to a removable antenna. And on this port, you can insert, among other things, a programming cable, which means that the radio itself is programmable, meaning I can set power levels in accordance with the channels that I want to use. The other thing that we will start seeing on a programmable radio is that all a channel is a saved frequency. You can learn a lot about frequencies from just studying a little bit about ham. That's not to say ham and GMRS are the same thing, because they are not, but the principle of a frequency as a channel is still the same. So you'll start to see that you can do more with your channels. On the subject of programming, this is an opinion, and it's something I find important. Any GMRS radio that I'm going to purchase is going to be compatible with a program called Chirp, and I will link to that in the description. But Chirp is just a way of programming almost any radio, and it is software that works on Linux, on Mac, and on Windows computers. So whatever your flavor of computer, you can work with Chirp to program your radio. Your alternative is going to be something like this keypad that you see on this Baofeng UV5G. This is exactly the same form factor as the UV5R Baofeng, which is either much beloved or much hated depending who you ask. One thing though, it is ubiquitous, it's been around, it's inexpensive, and it simply works, but it does not have the greatest user interface for programming, making that Chirp compatibility absolutely huge. The other nice thing about Chirp is it's very easy to standardize how you program your radios, because you can save that programming and apply it to radio after radio that you program yourself. Now, FRS radios are pre-programmed out of the box. You do not need to change those channels. GMRS radios will generally come pre-programmed as well. As a matter of fact, other than buying them used, I've never bought one that needed to be programmed to use as a simplex or radio-to-radio transmission. When it comes to GMRS, we have another advantage to extend our range a little bit more other than antennas, aerials, and extra power, and that's the use of repeaters. So when you want to use a GMRS radio, to do so properly, your step one is going to be to obtain your license from the FCC. This is like getting a fishing license, except the fishing license is good for you and your family, and not just for 1 year, but for 10 years, and at the time of this recording, it costs about $35. For that $35, you're legally using this radio, something to be said for that, and you have access to sites like mygmrs.com, which I will also link to. And on mygmrs.com, you can put in your zip code and you can find repeaters that are available for the GMRS community, licensed users, in your general area to use if you have them nearby. Not everywhere is covered well by repeaters, but in general you'll find repeaters just about everywhere, and there's nothing stopping you from taking that little bit of an expense, well, it could be a lot of expense depending how fancy you want to get, and putting in your own repeater either. It's very simple to do so. I don't want to say easy, but there are plenty of guides out there to do it. There is an expense associated with it, both in money and time, so do your research before you decide on doing that. The advantage in general to two-way radios is that you own your own infrastructure, and with GMRS you can extend that infrastructure further. Now, GMRS repeaters that are out on these sites are going to be free to use. Some may belong to a club. They can do what they want with these. They may not be listed on there, so not everyone is going to be listed on it, but a lot of them are. And in general, in my experience, they've all been free to use, although I have had to ask permission to get on a couple of them. The main thing you're going to want to do is take a look and see what you can reach from where you live or where you have to go to reach one to extend your range. And again, line of sight radio, meaning that relatively straight ahead, height makes might, better antenna equals more distance, more power, more distance. So we will be sticking to the world of hand talkers for the rest of this discussion, but do remember that most of what I'm telling you for this hand talker will apply to a base station or mobile as well. As a matter of fact, let's get the one big caveat out of the way. And for mobile and base stations, channels 8 through 14, if they're available at all on those, will be listen only. And that's because of the power potential that those 30 to 50 watt radios have when compared to a 2 to 5 watt radio. Those are reserved for very low power, so a lot of manufacturers don't even include them on their mobile or their base station. And if they do, it will be in listen only mode. So a little takeaway for those of you that maybe want to communicate with somebody using FRS as well on your GMRS radio, stick to channels 1 through 7 and 15 through 22 to include those folks on. All right. So another big difference, a GMRS radio requires the FCC license to legally use. Go to the website. I will link to the FCC's website, and I'm going to mention another channel here. I'm not affiliated with him, though I wish I was, and that is Not a Rubicon. He has a survival guide basically on his homepage that will walk you through getting your license from the FCC. It's a government website. It's not the easiest thing to navigate. There are tons of different instructions out there on how to do so, so we're not going to reinvent the wheel here. Check out Not a Rubicon. If you're not already a subscriber to his, go ahead and subscribe. Awesome source of information, far more in-depth on GMRS than what I'm going to go into. If you want to know more about radios, if you want to know more about some of their features, he's a great guy to check out. A couple of special notes on this. We already covered the clipping and stuff like that and the quiet sound when we go from FRS to GMRS. When we mention programming GMRS, the bandwidth can be constricted on it from 25 kilohertz to 12.5 kilohertz. That's very geeky for saying we can make a smaller modulation package to make it easier to communicate with FRS if that's the goal, but there's a trade-off for that and how far you can communicate and the clarity you're going to have communicating to other GMRS users. Hand talker radios, 2 to 5 watts, although they can go up to 8. Again, although there are form factors like this from Baofeng that are ham radios, this one is not. This is a UV5G, often advertised as a UV5X. I will link to this in the description as well. The antenna I have here is a Nagoya. It's an NA771G antenna. I can link to that down below. It's something that I got just to try because where I lived before, I was able to hit 2 or 3 repeaters. Where I live now, with these hand talkers, I cannot hit repeaters from most places on my property. Sometimes if I'm up on the hill, I can reach the nearest repeater on a good day, more or less. It's not what I would call reliable, so I will be going to either an aerial or a base station in the future to see if I can reach it, but the future is not now as there are other things to do. Finally, let's go back through some genuine use cases for these radios. Number one, if you're out in inclement weather, it's a simple one button to push. It's got a large knob to twist to turn it on and off. You're going to have your channels preset. You've got an easy screen, I hope you all can see that, to see what channels you're looking at and monitoring. And I hope you noticed the lower channel that was issued on this was NOAA channel 6, which covers my region for bad weather here. NOAA radio is your government-sponsored weather radio. This is very useful to keep track of a storm that may be coming in. Good way just to have that background information. It's another source of information gathering. Another big advantage to these GMRS radios in general, this will vary manufacturer to manufacturer, is the ability to scan channels listening for communications, which if your local emergency services is using these, you can use that to kind of keep abreast of anything that's going on. Other good use cases for this: out hiking, taking a trip in multiple vehicles, kayaking or canoeing, camping, hunting, any kind of special party, like, we're in the fall season here, coming up to Halloween, it's like hay rides and haunted trails and stuff like that. All excellent use cases. These are not just, hey, if the zombies come, we're going to use this. It's kind of silly to invest in that. These are things that can make your life a little bit easier. In general, just a very good thing to have. Again, the radio featured here is the Baofeng UV5X series, UV5G in particular. It's very entry-level radio, very inexpensive. There's a lot of features that you can learn to use with it. It is chirp compatible, and it has a host of other options to it that may appeal to you. If you are strictly using this for the preparedness space, one big advantage with the UV series radios is they've been around forever, and all of the accessories, with the exception of antennas, from one UV series will fit another. So you can get tons of extended battery packs for them. You can get the normal battery packs very inexpensively. You can even get AA battery packs for them that you can put your rechargeable Eneloop batteries or your Amazon Basics in or whatever. That is an advantage. Other radios have similar, if not the same thing, so do your research. And I would highly recommend, of all the features that you may look for in your GMRS radio, look for one that is chirp compatible, because it does make your programming eminently easier, especially when it comes to programming in those repeaters. And repeaters are really the gold standard of what makes GMRS so much better than FRS. Repeaters can extend you out potentially to 100 miles or more. Repeaters can be linked. Take a look at some GMRS nets to see what you can do with these, what the potential actually is. Here at KSG, we're keeping it very simple. Our primary use is simplex, and we do occasionally get on the repeaters just to see who's out there and do a little bit of networking and stuff like that. So hopefully this has answered a few questions for you, cleared up the difference between your standard big box store bubble pack radios and your slightly better option GMRS radios that you can use in more ways and get more value from. So until next time, stay safe out there.